Hi and welcome. Today we're heading to RAF Waddington and we're going to take a picture of an F-16 jet. I'll start by showing you the image and then I'll walk you through the whole process from end to end so you can have a go at doing the same thing too. This is a Lockheed Martin F-16 or Fighting Falcon. Their nickname is Viper. This is part of the Turkish Air Force based out of Gran Canaria. Whenever you see a picture of a plane you can check the tail number, in this case 920022, and find a bit of information about it.
This morning I am on my winter bike, which is not my pretty one, and it's called a Honda Deauville 650. I actually bought this bike for £510, and to say it was in a bad state would be a dramatic understatement. So it's had a lot of work done to it over Christmas, and hopefully it's a reliable winter rider for me now. So we'll get about our journey now. It's about an hour and a half to get from here to RAF Waddington, and we'll catch up on the other side. We'll take this opportunity to talk a little bit about equipment. So you can take good photos with anything. You can take bad photos with anything too. I feel very fortunate to have the kit that I've got. I've gradually built it up over many years, and today I'm bringing an R5 by Canon. It's the Mark 1, which is my preference. It's got quite a high resolution 45 megapixel sensor, which means I can take a picture, zoom in, crop it, and still have a decent final image. The Canon versus Nikon debate, they're both brilliant. Same with Sony. They've all got some good features, they've all got some great selling points, and they're all fantastic pieces of technology. In terms of lenses, so for today obviously we're going for aircraft, so some of it's going to be up close and some of it is going to require some zoom. So if you have the luxury of a zoom lens for a visit like this, it's great. Ordinarily people will tell you prime's the best, and they are, but a zoom lens gives you much more flexibility when you've got a target that's changing shape and size so much on its approach to you. I recently, just a few months ago, managed to finally get the Canon RF 100-500 lens. That is a cracker of a lens. It takes some really sharp photos, and it's quite a good focal length for what we're doing today. Okay, so here we are. You can see the helicopter to our right coming up. Nice bright yellow one. Can already take a nice picture of that. There are a couple of car parks here. We're aiming for the second one. This is the overflow, which already looks quite busy. Not sure if we'll be able to get into the main car park, but we'll have a little look up there before we go back down. It's like a step ladder convention here at the moment. So people use the ladders to get clear of the hedges and take a better picture. Thankfully, we'll be doing the same. So you can imagine taking a ladder on a bike is not a small feat. You'll notice I have not done that. I do have a friend here who is already set up, and I will be making use of his we'll be sliding his ladder. Now we need to be careful we end up on some solid ground. This is a little bit concrete, which is quite handy for us. So we will pop our stand down here. Okay, so we've arrived. Took us about an hour and a half. Currently 8:43, so we'll head over and get set up.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about settings now we're going to use for the photography. So on Canon you can shoot JPEG, RAW or both. I'm shooting JPEG, which is somewhat controversial. People do have different views on this. I've personally processed RAW and JPEG photos side by side and produced exactly the same result. So 1/500th of a second for the shutter speed. That's quite a fast shutter speed. It lets you freeze action well. F7.1 for the aperture. That is the widest aperture you can use at the full focal length of 500mm. And ISO 200 was just to make sure I got adequate brightness on the underside of the plane. My shortcut menus are set up to switch between electronic and mechanical shutter quite quickly. For the planes I was shooting mechanical shutter for a lot of it, and that stops the bending you can see on the propellers that you get with electronic shutter. They call it a rolling shutter effect, and it's where the time taken to read out the sensor is long enough that it actually affects the capture of the image. So mechanical shutter. The autofocus has become exceptional on the modern cameras. I was changing to vehicle detection for the shooting of the planes on the day, and that's probably all you need to change at this stage. So 1/500th shutter, f7.1 aperture, ISO 200, mechanical shutter, detecting vehicles. So the only other point to mention is that I was on high-speed continuous shooting. You can go to an even faster shooting rate at high speed plus, but that's with electronic shutter. So with the mechanical shutter, high speed continuous allows you to take a lot of photos very quickly. So here are some sample pictures of some planes that were taken on the day. We've got a nice mix in here and some good pictures. We'll have a look at a couple of quick videos too that were taken of the planes quite nearby, and then look into the editing process. Okay, it's time to move into the editing phase now. The first thing I do is very quickly go through all the pictures and delete anything that's obviously bad. Some of them will be missed focus or motion blur, and I'll take those out very quickly. My aim is generally to get the number of pictures down from 2,500 in this case to something manageable. I'll probably target about 500 to 800 photos. Okay, so into the processing of the image now. First thing I'm going to do is add a light crop to the image. I'm going to lose a little bit of the sky and a small amount of the runway before this yellow line here. I like to try and fill the frame quite well with the target, so something like that's a little bit better. I am leaving a little bit of excess sky here, which I'm going to pull down with a gradient filter. So gradient filters are over here on the menu, and I'm using a transparency gradient, which will just fade it. I'm going to drop it down to be quite a light opacity, so about 50%, and it's just going to darken the sky a bit like this. I'm going to start the gradient up here above the image, so when I pull it down it has a smaller effect on the image, and I'm just going to tweak that until I get to a slight darkening at the top of the image that I actually like. About that's probably where I want to be. Okay. I'm going to use layers to edit the image. It's a simple way of me showing you the effect the various changes have. So the first thing I'll do is duplicate the background and create another layer. And I can play about with this layer, I can do things on it, whatever I want to do, and then I can hide those away and show you the changes that we've made. So a layer is just a copy of the image that you're doing a thing to. Personally, I like quite vibrant images, so I'm going to go to Image Adjustments and Vibrance, and I'm going to tweak the vibrance and saturation. So I'll drag the slider right to the left for vibrance, and you'll see it washes out all the colours, and right to the right hand side, and it makes them really pop. I'm going to push it quite far to the right on this image, so I'm going to increase the vibrance of the colours. Generally, as a rule, I will do a saturation that's no more than half what the vibrance value is. So I'm 72 on the vibrance, I'll do no more than 36 on the saturation. In reality, on this image, I'm not going to need that much. If I push it right up, you'll see it looks very artificial, and right down it'll be black and white. Okay, so we're going to start from 0, and we're just going to boost that until we reach some nice warm colours. I think I'm quite happy at that, actually, so that's 21. So I'll turn that layer off so you can see how we started and where we get to. So I quite like that effect, that nice warm colour temperature. So I'll duplicate the layer again. You can give these sensible names if you're doing it. And then we'll move on to the next step. So for me, the next step on this, I'm going to tweak the sharpness a little bit. So if you zoom in, it does withstand zoom well, but this writing could do with a little sharpening. So I'm going to go filter, sharpen, and then unsharp mask. It is a case of experimenting a little bit. The amount, if you put it up really high, it will look very artificial, and really low won't do anything. And the second thing you're going to want to play with is the radius, so how big an area you're sharpening over. I generally keep the radius around 0.8, 0.9, sometimes up to 1, maybe 2 pixels. And the amount, maybe I'll go up to sort of 80, 90%. And I'm really just looking at this writing here and deciding whether or not I like the effect it's having. And I don't want to go too far with it. Okay, I think that's okay, so just turn that layer off and then on. So if you look at the writing, you'll see it's a little bit clearer. Now if we zoom out and look at the overall image, you won't actually notice this much at all. It's only when you zoom in you see that detail. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate that layer again so we can work on another element of the image. And I'm going to do something slightly more complicated now. So I'm going to use the quick selection tool here, and I'm going to select the whole aeroplane. So I'll just quickly drag over the whole thing. So now I've done that, I'm going to create a layer mask by clicking this button here. And what that's done is that's made it so that when we change this image, only the bits that were selected in that layer mask get affected. So we're only changing the plane. So we can do what we like. The background stays the same, but the plane will get dramatic effects. I'm going to duplicate that layer again with that layer mask, because what I want to do is use this to preserve parts of the image while I change other parts of the image. So I'm going to turn off the top layer so we can't see it and drop back to the layer below. So this is a mask which will only affect the plane. I'll just show you that one more time. If I make a change on this layer, it will only affect the plane. So I want the opposite of that. I want to change the background only, but not the plane. So I click on the mask and I'll go to Image, Adjustments, and then Invert. Now you'll see the mask is more white than black now. It's only affecting the background. So if I go to the image itself and make a change, you'll see the background will change and the plane will stay the same. Okay, that's great. So what we want to do to the background is increase this blur effect. This motion blur is quite nice. This specific image was taken with settings which you can see here. The shutter speed was 1/500th of a second. Now to get a really nice motion blur here, you can be as low as 1/200th of a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to artificially recreate that. So I've got my layer where I'm only going to be affecting the background, and I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and then Motion Blur. Now when I was taking the picture, I was panning from right to left, and so I'm going to keep the angle at 0 degrees, so it's going to move in the same way. And you can see by moving this bottom slider, you can change the background of the image to have significant motion blur. You can ignore the fact that the plane's getting blurred. We're going to restore that in a moment. So we're only actually looking at the background to see what blur level we want to apply to the image. So I think that's quite a nice level of blur for the background. Maybe push it a little bit harder. That's probably too much. Okay, about that. Okay, so we'll click OK to that. So the image without the motion blur looks like this, and with the motion blur it looks like this. Now the downside is you can see that the edges of the plane have all got motion blur applied to them despite our mask. Okay, so we go back to our top layer. You will remember on this one we have a mask that only affects the plane itself. So if we click on that image and make a change to it, it will only affect the plane. What we want to do now is take more of this original image around the plane and lose the rough edges where the motion blur has affected it. And we can do that just with a simple brush, just a brush tool, and we're going to set it to white, which will paint in this mask the layer underneath. So if I drag this over, you can see that the edges of the plane, they're all coming out crisp and sharp now, because we're pulling them through from the original image before the motion blur was applied. I do have to be careful down here because I don't want the post in the background to lose its blur, but I do want to take the blur off the wheel. So I'm going to just shrink down my my brush tool a little bit to give me a better control over this area, and then I'm going to keep tidying up these edges, and that's looking a lot better already. Okay, so that's all our edges back and restored. We've got all our arrows back. Okay, and that's quite nice. So again, we'll turn this layer off and you see the motion blur coming through, and turning it back on, we've got a nice crisp sharp image. Okay, we will select all of those layers now, right click and merge the layers, and then we've got one image again with all those effects applied. The last thing left to do is, there's quite a lot of darkness on the tail and the underside of the fuselage here. I'd quite like to brighten those up. We have dodge and burn, so dodge brightens and burn darkens, so we want the dodge tool to brighten things up, and I'm going to push to a soft edged brush. I don't want a hard edge, and then I'm going to make it quite large. I'm going to go about 400 pixels, and we're looking at the dark bits, the shadows, with an exposure of about 50%. If you keep it nice and low, you can have multiple passes over to brighten up the image, and it has a much more natural effect. So I'm just going to brighten up the undercarriage here a little, and the back of this weaponry, and the back of the plane here a little as well. Just going to pull out a little bit more detail, and this this tail wing as well needs a little bit of brightening, I think. Okay, so that's quite nice. This wheel as well, this needs a bit of a brighten up, so we'll just, that's it, pull that out a little bit more detail. Okay, that's looking quite nice now as a final image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 5 minutes, go away, come back to it and see if I still like it. Okay, 5 minutes later, I like the image. There's one tweak I want to make. I just want to pull out a little bit more detail on the plane, and I'm going to do that by just adjusting the contrast for the whole image, and I'm going to push that up to, I should think, about 30. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. So if I turn that off, you can see the difference it makes, and back on, it just pulls out a little bit more of the detail here and makes it look a bit crisper. I think I'm happy with that now, so I'm going to call that one a complete image. So I hope you enjoyed seeing the process of planning the trip, heading over, taking a picture and editing it. Please join next time to see more of the same content.